My name is Kayan. I am 42 years old. For most of my life, I believed money was the closest thing to God that existed on earth. By the time I turned 40, I was worth over $3 billion. Oil investments, global real estate, private equity acquisitions. I had built an empire stretching across continents. I owned properties in London, Dubai, New York, Paris. My calendar was full of board meetings and private flights. My name opened doors. My signature moved markets. When people spoke to me, they measured their words. When I made decisions, people rearranged their lives. Control was oxygen to me. Power was identity. And faith, any faith, was weakness. I did not grow up poor. I grew up disciplined, calculated, strategic. My father taught me that the world belongs to the strong, that emotions are liabilities, that belief without leverage is foolishness. Religion, to me, was something the powerless clung to. Until August 12th, 2023. That was the night everything I believed about reality fractured. The Cathedral. It began as a transaction. A 12th century Gothic cathedral in Europe. Struggling attendance, mounting maintenance costs, leadership quietly considering sale options. My real estate advisor presented it like any other asset. Historic property. Landmark designation. Restoration potential. Global publicity. The photos were breathtaking. Soaring arches. Intricate stone carvings. Stained glass windows depicting scenes from the life of Christ. It had stood for over 800 years. And when I saw it, something inside me stirred, not reverence. Dominance. It wasn't about profit margins. It wasn't about appreciation value. It was about ownership. The idea of acquiring something that had stood as a symbol of devotion for centuries, something that had survived wars, plagues, revolutions, and making it mine. Within 2 weeks, I purchased it. The local pastor signed the documents with trembling hands. His congregation had voted with heavy hearts. Financial necessity left them few options. I remember watching him wipe tears from his eyes. I felt nothing. Actually, that's not true. I felt powerful. At first, my intentions were framed as redevelopment. But privately, it was more than that. I wanted to prove something, not to the world, but to myself. That even the sacred can be bought. That history bows to capital. That belief collapses under leverage. I walked through that cathedral with architects and consultants, pointing out changes I wanted made. The altar removed. The interior redesigned. Artifacts relocated. Structural modifications. The construction foreman avoided eye contact when I described certain ideas. He was practical, not ideological. But I could see discomfort in his silence. Money quiets discomfort. I told myself I was simply modernizing an obsolete structure. But if I'm honest, there was arrogance in every step. I would stand in the center aisle and speak loudly just to hear my voice echo through the vaulted ceiling. I would run my hand along carved stone and think, centuries of devotion, and now it belongs to me. I had built skyscrapers. This building felt different. It didn't intimidate me. It unsettled me. The demolition phase was scheduled to begin August 13th. The night before, I decided to go alone. No cameras. No staff. No foreman. No press. Just me. And the cross. There was a massive wooden cross mounted behind the altar. Nearly 20 feet tall. Dark oak. Intricate carvings. Latin inscriptions I couldn't read. I told myself I wanted to inspect structural mounting points. But that was not the real reason. I wanted to feel the first strike. I arrived at 11:30 p.m. The streets were empty. My headlights swept across ancient stone as I pulled up. The cathedral loomed against the night sky, silent, immovable. Inside, it was colder than I expected. Moonlight filtered through stained glass, painting the floor in faint blues and reds. I brought a flashlight and a hammer. The silence was oppressive. Every step echoed like a countdown. I set up a ladder against the wall beneath the cross. The metal legs scraped against stone, the sound sharper than it should have been. Halfway up the ladder, I hesitated. Not from fear. From awareness. There is a strange sensation that happens when you stand alone in a place where thousands have prayed before you. It is not audible. It is not visible. But it is heavy. I ignored it. At the top of the ladder, I reached out and touched the wood. It was warm. That surprised me. I adjusted my grip on the hammer. And then I spoke. Not to anyone present. To the silence. If you are real, I said quietly, almost mocking, stop me. I raised the hammer. And I brought it down. The moment the hammer touched the wood, something happened. Every stained glass window in the cathedral ignited with light. Not moonlight. Not electricity. Light. Brilliant. Blinding. Radiant. It didn't shine from outside in. It shone from within. The colors deepened beyond anything natural. Blues like oceans at impossible depth. Reds like molten metal. Golds that seemed alive. The air felt charged, like pressure before lightning strikes. The hammer flew from my hand. I did not drop it. It left. I felt something hit my chest, not physical, but forceful, and I was thrown backward off the ladder. I hit the stone floor. Hard. The breath left my lungs in a violent rush. But the worst part wasn't the fall. It was the immobility. I could not move. I was fully conscious, fully aware, but my limbs would not respond. My chest felt compressed. Breathing became shallow. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. And then came something I had never felt before in my life. Exposure. Not physical exposure. Moral exposure. It felt as though every decision I had ever made, every act of pride, every manipulation, every ruthless calculation, was visible. Not to the world. To something else. Something present. The silence was not empty anymore. It was occupied. And for the first time in my adult life, I was not in control. I had built my identity on power. On dominance. On financial invincibility. Lying on that stone floor, unable to move, I understood something terrifying. None of it mattered. I could not negotiate this moment. I could not purchase relief. I could not command it to stop. My mind raced through my life like a collapsing film reel. Employees I had crushed to preserve margins. Relationships I had severed to preserve pride. Opportunities to show mercy I had declined, because mercy does not scale profitably. I saw myself clearly. Not as successful. As hollow. Tears began without my permission. Hot. Relentless. Uncontrolled. When I could finally move again, I did not stand. I found myself on my knees. I don't remember choosing that posture. But I stayed there. And for the first time in my life, I did not speak to dominate. I whispered. I was wrong. The words felt foreign. Forgive me. I did not recite a ritual. I did not quote scripture. I simply admitted what I had never admitted before. I was not sovereign. The pressure lifted. The light softened. The windows returned to their normal appearance. But something inside me had shifted. The arrogance that had defined me felt brittle, like glass that had just cracked. I stayed there for hours. Not bargaining. Not strategizing. Just present. There is a kind of peace that does not come from circumstances. It does not come from portfolio performance. It does not come from applause. It comes from surrender. And I had never surrendered to anything in my life. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I began making calls. All renovations canceled. All demolition halted. All contracts settled in full. My advisors were confused. My consultants were frustrated. I did not attempt to explain the light. I could barely explain it to myself. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I could not destroy what I had encountered. I met with the local pastor 4 days later. He expected confrontation. I returned the cathedral to the congregation. No conditions. No publicity. No repayment. He asked me why. I told him the only honest answer I had. Because I met something I cannot deny. Transformation is expensive. Not financially. Personally. When news of my change spread, business partnerships dissolved. Investors withdrew. Family relationships fractured. Friends distanced themselves. Some accused me of losing my mind. Others accused me of betrayal. I did not argue. because the peace I carried into those conversations was stronger than the rejection. I lost influence, but I gained clarity. Before that night, I believed. Power defines reality. After that night, I understood. Reality defines power. Before that night, I believed. Sacredness is superstition. After that night, I understood. Some spaces carry weight because people have surrendered there for generations. Before that night, I believed. I was untouchable. After that night, I understood. I was never in control. I did not become perfect. I did not become naive. I still understand finance, strategy, negotiation, but I no longer worship them. I fund restoration projects now. I support preservation of sacred architecture. Not because buildings are divine, but because what happens inside them matters. I read scripture not as a critic, but as someone who has felt its author near. And sometimes late at night, I remember the moment the hammer touched wood. The moment light erupted. The moment pride collapsed. I cannot prove to you what happened. I cannot recreate it. But I know this. I entered that cathedral believing I owned it. I left knowing I do not even own my next breath. Maybe you have never tried to tear down a cross. But maybe you have built your identity on something fragile. Money, reputation, control, achievement. I did. And it shattered in a single moment of light. If there is one thing I learned on August 12th, 2023, it is this. Arrogance feels powerful until you encounter something greater. And when you do, surrender is not weakness. It is freedom. My name is Kion. And the night I tried to break a symbol, something broke inside me instead. And that breaking saved my life.